the golf swing is just another form of behaviour. So they don't recognise their own behaviour. They've got to learn how to learn again. Instead of everybody wants a quick fix, they want self-gratification. They want to get there straight away. They want it yesterday. And so people are trying to play golf that way. They think they go on a driving range and they can just drill. If I repeat this X amount of times, it's going to repeat. Oh, and then I'm going to go to a psychologist and I'm going to make sure I can use it on the golf course.
Yeah.
And it's just a broken system. How's things then, Gyp? How are you keeping? All right?
Yeah, fine, thanks, Marcus. Yeah, everything's all right. Just not much different, really.
No.
No, not much different. What about yourself? You all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, all right. It's just, like everyone else, really. Just can't wait for it to pass. You just, make the best of it.
Yeah, it's hard on the kids, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, Alex, do you want to kind of, we had a chat and you've chatted with Gyp as well. Do you want to kind of lead the way? Because I think it's important we keep kind of your backstory with Gyp and just take it from there, really.
Yeah, I think before Gyp introduces herself and kind of explains her background and how it's progressed over the years and kind of like what we've done, it'd be a good place for me to start on how I ended up at Gyp's door all those years ago. And I think maybe we've probably been working about, it must be at least 10, 11 years now, Gyp.
It's going to be a decade easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a relationship where we're in contact every week, but we are always kind of in contact at least probably like once a month or something like that. So it's been a really fascinating insight from my point of view, and I'm thankful for all the help that you've given me over the years with almost like expanding my own awareness and mind into the areas that you specialise in. So thank you very much for that. That's
more than welcome.
But yeah, so just rewinding back, I think, how I ended up at your door, where do I start? I think it all stems from our mutual friend, Nick Middleton, and everyone who's seen these past few or past couple of podcast style things that we've done or webinars. I think people will know who Nick is, so I'm not going to introduce who he is, but he is he's the guy or created the Zen kind of philosophy, and he's part of the team that we're all a part of. But he, what's the best way to describe it? I think before I met Nick, I had a lot of preconceptions and no real insight into creating an optimum way of thinking, understanding, experiencing this like optimal state in order to be able to enhance my performance. And I think every golfer has gone through that or understands that to a certain extent, where whether it's they've turned up all rushed on the first tee and it's taken them a few holes to settle down. So that's kind of a very vague example of that. But I also think that from my own experience, that stems from school and not really being very inquisitive naturally, and I didn't have the ability to be able to learn the way that I wanted, and I think that caused me great frustration and ultimately turned me into what I call a clock watcher. So when I was sat at school, I was very, very much disengaged by the teachers and how I was almost like being told what to learn, how to do things. That didn't really like sit very well with me, and school kind of just passed me by. And the only thing I enjoyed about school was the sporting activities and the afternoon football sessions that you have in your lunch break. But having no real applicational tools to be able to train or to induce this optimum kind of state that we're hopefully going to get into later on was just wasn't really available to me. But I definitely knew that it was a thing, because in my background of being a footballer or even badminton, even playing out, I'm at my parents' house now and I'm looking out to where I used to play as a kid. And I can remember like creating things and my awareness of time would go completely out the window. I would be out in the morning playing in the field that I'm looking at, whether it was golf or even army in the bushes. Next thing I know, it would be tea time. And that awareness of what I was doing was just such a childlike flow state, but there was a real like seriousness to it. And that's how I felt how I performed my best, especially when I was playing football. And at that time, I was heavily into the football, and that's how I made the association between believing that there was such a thing in this idea of being able to think a little bit more holistically and a little bit different in order to help my own journey as a golfer at that time. What else is there? I think I realised that when I was getting taught golf early on, there was a similarity between that and the way that I felt like when I was at school. So again, being told what to do, and then because I was ultimately then paying for my own tuition at that point, I would question why I was getting told to do certain things. And ultimately, I never got the answers that was satisfactory in order for me then to fully go away and immerse myself in what I'd been taught in order to do it. It was all a case of, well, I've been told what to do, so therefore that works. But as the older you get, you sometimes start thinking a little bit differently, thinking, well, actually, who's to say that what they were telling me, and then me putting all these hours and hours into doing what I've been told was actually going to pay off. And I really did feel like that wasn't working, that wasn't the way forward. So kind of like that classical way of being educated didn't really sit well with me at school, and it didn't really sit well with me as I early on in my golfing career. And that's probably what led me to Gyp's front door, in order to almost like change my mindset and my awareness through loads and loads of different things, through like examples of like the way that I breathe, the way that I think, the stuff that we've adopted over the years has ranged from NLP stuff, Alexander work that you do, Gyp, warrior walking, mind mapping, all these different things have something to do with what we're trying to achieve. And that's, creating the optimum state of being in order to enjoy life and in order to perform. And ultimately just, I think I probably hit the nail on the head, to enjoy everything that you do, because when you enjoy things, you kind of get lost in the process a lot more when you do it. And everybody's got that in them. And I think a good example for that would be when people maybe pick up a book. When they pick up a book, they can be very, very easily lost in the book, and the imagination that the book's giving you, and the insight and the knowledge, whether it's a fictional book or non-fictional. I think it really it resonates that we do have this capacity to get lost in a task and enjoy it as well at the same time. But on the flip side of that, we've all we've picked up a book and we've read maybe 5 or 6 lines, or a magazine or whatever it may be. And because our awareness is not really like lost in the task, because we might have other things going on in our world which are affecting that moment in time, we don't actually know what we've read. So we're not really lost in the task. And I think that that's a half decent example of how I feel about my golf sometimes. And especially back to when I was being coached about what I was being told to do, I had this like feeling in my head, like, oh, I'm not engaging, but I'm just going to do it because that's what I've been told to do. But then the more we've worked together and you've opened my awareness up to all these different, almost like creating different states, that has a massive knock-on effect on the way that you learn. And then ultimately the way that I then carry that on into like tournament golf, for me anyway, and also into situations like this, because situations like now, this is like a new form of territory for me, where I'm kind of speaking out publicly, and even now I am conscientious about what I'm saying, and this is something that I'm going to have to work on in order to become a lot more fluent as I perceive it internally. But hopefully I'm putting myself in a position which is slightly uncomfortable, but at the same time I'm bizarrely enjoying it as well. So I think that was an okay introduction to how we met, and I think if you want to maybe elaborate on anything that I've touched on there, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I'd say that going back to when you was at school, when you was finding it difficult to engage in any of the lessons and stuff like that, There's a biologist called Lyle Watson, and one of his things that he's famous for quoting is that the minute a child starts school, the rot sets in. And what he means by that is you take a child out of a natural environment where they're in natural child, where they're playing, they're using their imagination, they're creating, they're in the creative process, they're in the moment, their brain waves are generally in an alpha theta right up until they're about 7. As soon as you put them in school, because they have to sit in one position, a bad position, for hours on end, they are allowed to go out for playtime. So instead of the world being full of play, now there isn't any play until that allotted 15 minutes when you rush outside, kick a ball around, beat each other up, whatever you do, play crazy, come back in again, you're sat there again, and you've got to listen to this never-ending sort of dialogue coming at you from the teachers, which is generally stuff you're not even slightly interested in. So your sort of right brain creative capacities dumb down. All that sense of imagination and play, unless you get a really good teacher that can harness your imagination and create a magical world around the children, which some can, most can't. What happens is then the child becomes more and more and more left brain dominant. So they're absorbing to a degree what they're being taught, but they're not enjoying it. It's not an enjoyment process because they're having to sit still, which is not natural to children. It's not natural to any animal to sit still for hours on end. They're being talked at. They have to copy things down. So it's all becomes very, very left-brained, and all the joy is taken out of it. All the joy is removed. So obviously in the school holidays and stuff like that, it's an opportunity to get back and get all that enjoyment back, the joy, you know, the pleasure of running wild, you know, climbing trees, catching things, experimenting. And so because of that, those tiny, small little sections of time, our right brain still develops. It's still got that sense of freedom, but it's still really dumbed down. And then you're back to school again, and you think this process goes on for some people. They do uni as well, up until they're about 27. So from the age of 5 to the age of 27, your whole life is dictated by knowledge, by facts, knowledge. It's all left brain stuff. It completely cramps the individual, and unless you're a bit of a maverick yourself, like you must have been, to feel that sort of inner rebellion. I'm not, can't take this in. I'm too busy looking out the window. I want to be somewhere else. I want to do other things. You kind of succumb to that, and a lot of children do succumb to that left brain teaching, and they get stuck in that rut then for the rest of their life, throughout their working life. They work to earn their money, but they're not doing a job that they love or they enjoy because it doesn't feel right. I think if I do a job that I love, then surely that's not a proper job. I need a proper job where 9 to 5, whatever it is, earn the money, pay the bills, and on that treadmill until you fucking die, basically.
Yeah.
Which is what most people's lives are. But if you, at that young age, if you're already thinking outside the box, like I can't do this, or I'm not going to detention, I'm not handing that homework in because it's a load of crap, I'm not doing it. Although that would sound like the child is then like a bad child, naughty child, not doing as they're told, not falling into line. Really, that child's got loads of potential, much more than the other kids, because they are in their head, in their mind, they want to forge their own path. They want to find out what's outside the box. They want to do things differently. They want to learn things that they're interested in, things that excite them, things that give them joy. But because they're little, they've got no way of expressing that. And you can't argue with the adults. You've got to do as you're told.
Yeah.
If you hung on to a certain amount of that, which I certainly did as a kid, I was rubbish at school, too naughty, too distracted, too busy pissing about, making jokes, making other kids laugh, and all that kind of thing. I think if you capture some of that and you take it with you into your adulthood, instead of it being you being like the naughty one, you're the one that can like then think outside the box and do things differently because you haven't been trapped in that rut of education that doesn't allow you to think for yourself. And this is what we're talking about. So that stops you thinking for yourself. If you're a natural creative child, you will think for yourself and you'll take that into your older years, and that's where altered states come in. But yeah, carry on, Alex.
Yeah, I think it's also important just for people who don't actually know what left brain and right brain is. If you want to just quickly elaborate on what that means.
Okay, well, we've got a left hemisphere and we've got a right hemisphere, and they're like that. There's two. So we've got two brains, and they're joined together by a corpus callosum, which is a massive network of nerve fibres that join the two halves together. But through education and training with kids, we tend to lose the connection. So the corpus callosum is not doing its job anymore. It should be sending information with both halves, but it's not, because we've become left brain dominant, which is the learning brain. It's the facts brain, the numbers brain, the history brain, the geography brain. This, on the right side, you've got the creative brain, the imagination brain, the artist, the painter, the writer, the person that, say, designs architecture. That's right brain stuff. So if you're lucky, some of this still stays active and you're not completely swamped by left brain. So moving on, as you grow up, if you get stressed about anything, your right brain and, well, both, the whole of your brain gets flooded with blood, which prevents you thinking properly. So you can get into like panic mode, can't think clearly, you can't be creative. And that can be because someone's stressing you out to perform. It could be because somebody wants something from you that you're not ready to deliver, or that you're being told what to do. So like, say your experience being told exactly what to do as a golfer is like a classical training method that doesn't sit with you, because you've already gone through that experience of rejecting that kind of left brain teaching. You don't like it. It doesn't feel comfortable. So what you want to do is, I suppose, take what they've given you, but also think, what else can I do? What else does it mean?
Yeah.
So you're thinking for yourself. You're not relying on, say, your coach saying, you've got to do it this way. Instead your coach could say, how can we work this out? How would you?
It's really interesting as well as that, because I think Marcus is an expert on this particular maybe sense that I'm about to say, but that translated into the golfing world nowadays can be argued that the left and the right brain are fighting with each other, because you've got all this data that's captured by you won't know, Gyp, what it's called, a TrackMan or some other measuring device, which tells you basically the far end of the fart with what's going on every part of the swing, from impact factors to all sorts, but without boring you about that. And then we've also then got to transcend that onto the golf course. So lots of people are playing by numbers, and they're trying to almost like be quite robotic in the way that they play, but at the same time they're also trying to somehow get into some sort of state of mind or flow state, if that's what you want to call it, or the zone to other people. Then they're fighting between the two. And I think what do you think about that, Marcus?
Yeah, I think they swing by numbers too. So they're not just thinking about how they're hitting the golf ball. They're thinking about how they're actually swinging the golf club and trying to conform to some kind of reductionist, kind of idealistic model that they've been indoctrinated with, really. And they become very, very passive in their learning, very submissive to their coach, almost laying themselves open, almost like all their belief system, all their values are almost put to one side, and they're almost shedding themselves of any responsibility, and therefore not providing an opportunity for themselves to learn, because they're just wanting to, if you like, become, for want of a better word, just kind of a clone. Kind of, they see a golf swing, the coach has got this model, and they want to kind of, I want to swing it like that. I want to swing it like that. Everybody says, I want to swing it like Tiger Woods. I want to swing it like Adam Scott. I want to swing it like, and they've got this kind of image that they've attached so much importance to, and it's started to create a belief system that I need to swing like that to be able to compete, to be able to actually perform. And then they go on the golf course, and what do they do if they don't play well? They start looking at the golf swing, and they're going, well, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, so that's why I'm not performing. So it's a broken model, and it just creates a lot of coach dependency, and the players losing their identity.
Right, okay.
Whatever identity they had at the beginning just starts to fade away, and then they get to a position again. Yeah. And then they get to a place where they just don't recognise themselves, they don't recognise their golf swing. And the golf swing is just another form of behaviour. So they don't recognise their own behaviour.
Yeah.
So it's kind of so for me, I mean, what you said right at the beginning, Gyp, it's actually it's reconnecting that individual for me with what they had at the beginning and how to learn.
Yeah.
They've got to learn how to learn again.
Exactly.
And before you even start anywhere, they've got to, like we had Dr. Martin Esty on a chat last week, and we was talking about children playing, and he said the play is very serious. So adults are seeing kids playing, and they're assuming they're just tossing about, messing about, there's no structure to it. That kid is seriously immersed in their own playful activity, and that is a beautiful thing. There's learning taking place. The connections are happening.
Yeah.
And they're developing an identity. They're interacting with they're interacting with the world around them.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're creating. I mean, from a biomechanist standpoint, they're starting to create movement skills.
Yeah,
they're adapting the movement behaviour to the environment around them. And and as a golf coach, if you make that environment stimulating in a way that's purposeful in relation to golf, then you're starting to develop, if you like, a movement vocabulary that they can start to use and create literacy within the game of golf.
Yeah.
Instead of everybody wants a quick fix, they want self-gratification, they want to get there straight away, they want it yesterday. And so they go to a coach who's offering them that, saying, look, this is I've got the secret. And I think, like you say, it's like at school. I mean, learning by parrot fashion, basically. I mean, it's a load of bullshit, like you say. I mean, it's like you pass your A levels or you pass your GCSEs. What have you done? You've just basically just regurgitated something you've just read 1,000 times.
Absolutely, 100%.
And so people are trying to play golf that way. They think they go on a driving range and they can just drill. If I repeat this X amount of times, it's going to repeat. Oh, and then I'm going to go to a psychologist and I'm going to make sure I can use it on the golf course.
Yeah.
And it's just a broken system. But sorry for droning on. I want to hear more.
No, that's good. It's good stuff. It's good to know. Yeah, I think
if my brother ever kicked out from a top of the sofa choke slam and I got to 1, 2, 3 and he kicked out, I was definitely pissed off. So when it comes to being serious as a child, everyone who watches this can resonate with that 1,000,000%. For anybody who says that's a load of crap, they're kidding themselves. That or they had a really bizarre childhood. One of the two.
Yeah. I think the kids playing. Go on.
Sorry, no, I was going to say most people learning golf are still in the classroom.
Yeah. Yes.
They're not in the playground.
It's the best analogy, isn't it? They're still there. They haven't moved out.
They're still in the classroom. They're not out in the playground. It's like they're having their first driving lesson every single time they go to the driving range or the golf course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's fascinating is that I don't know whether my take's correct on this, but I think like when we get to a certain point, we have to feel. Initially to go to a coach like yourself, Marcus, it's really important to know that it's you've got to be an open book. And in this society that we're in, where everything is quick fix, I mean, friggin' hell, we've got drive-through coffees now. It's absolutely ridiculous. Everything has to be at speed. We want things now. So therefore, the ideology of like working hard on something and being creative and putting like your full attention into it goes out the window a little bit. So this re-educating and the quote-unquote earlier about learning to learn, I think that there's an element still early on in the process in order to be able to just let go. You've got to like be maybe marginally in this classroom environment to start with in order to try and give yourself some sort of imagination of what the possibilities are, as opposed to just getting told to go and do this straight away. I think that with that in mind, because that's what we've always done, Marcus, and it's why we work together so well, in my opinion, that every time I ask you questions, you've always got answers for me, and they're always like more than satisfactory and beyond.
If I don't know, I haven't got an answer, and I'll find the answer or point you to someone who's got the answer. But so I haven't got the answer for everything. But I mean, just touching on what you've just mentioned there, the thing is, it disconnects us with our environment. So It's like you walk into a Wetherspoons now, they've got a flipping Wetherspoons app. You can order your drink, and they bring it to the table. So there's no interaction. There's no real. It's kind of the whole process is lost of interacting with your environment. We're becoming more and more disconnected and plugged in to the system, unfortunately. So we're losing our own sense of self. We're losing us, and so we start to lack self-awareness, and the more that continues, we become less adaptable. And whether that's a social conditioning model or whatever, it's I think
maybe it's deliberate.
We become, it's a way of controlling masses, and it's maybe golf. It's a way of teaching golf in a generic fashion.
Yeah.
So you make everybody left brain dominant, like Gyp says, and then you know how to service that now. You know how to provide information, because what you've created is you've created a very specific market for it, and then you can channel your advertising, your whatever propaganda, your information to that audience, because you've created that audience. So you know exactly how to service it. You know how to appease it. You know how to control it, essentially. And most golfers, you go to a driving range, they're all doing the same thing. So they're all on the range. You watch it, it's like watching robots in a line, and they're all got the alignment sticks out. They're doing the drills. They're thinking about what they're doing. And then what do? We talk about the best players ever who've lived, and what do we say? God, he was creative. What a genius!
Exactly.
Look at Seve, look at Tiger Woods. They could do stuff on a golf course no one else could do. Well, they weren't on a driving range with a flipping alignment stick 10 hours a day working on P2 or P3. I'm not saying they didn't do that at some point, but when they're on a golf course, or when they're actually really practicing, their deliberate practice wasn't drilling. Their deliberate practice was being playful.
Absolutely.
And Marcus, I think that sets up this conversation perfectly in what you've just said there, in the realms of like imagination and learning, what we've just touched on. I think the imagination, and it being one of like probably the greatest force on earth, is like the power to imagine is the power to create. And that's a quote unquote from you, Gyp, in a book that you wrote me once. And yesterday when we touched on what we were going to talk about today, you also mentioned like the 4 stages of learning, Gyp. So I don't know if you maybe want to just touch on either or both, if they want to even merge somehow. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, the 4 stages of learning, and this is true for everybody, are at the first instance, when you want to learn something new, you're at a stage of unconscious incompetence, which means you haven't got a clue. You might think you know how to do, like a kid thinks, I can swim, I can drive, but they can't. They just think they can. So there's no knowledge in there. They can't do it. So that's the first stage. So say, for instance, you go along to your local golf club, and you get with the coach, you're going to learn. You're at a stage of unconscious incompetence, which means you haven't got a clue, basically. When you start to learn, you reach a stage of conscious incompetence, which means you know your shit, but at least you're trying. You're picking up a few things, but you keep getting it wrong. It's frustrating. And because all the while your brain is mapping this stuff, if you keep practicing, you get to a stage of conscious competence, which means if you're paying attention, you can do it. You think, I did it. You get those moments, you think, I did it. And then it goes, and it's like someone's watching you, and it completely eludes you, and you can't do it anymore. And then when you're on your own, suddenly you can do it again. You think, I can't do this when people are watching. But when you're not being watched, when you're in your moment, you can do it. Yeah. And then the last stage of it is unconscious competence, which means the learning has gone unconscious. It's now mapped in your brain holistically. It's mapped in your motor cortex, and you can do it without thinking about it. So this is where, if you keep on unpacking a swing or a putt after you're really good at it, so you get really good at it, you think, I want to get in better, so I'm going to go to a putting coach, and you unpack what you're already doing to see if you can tweak it and make it even better, even more fantastic. That's when it starts to muck up with the wiring, because you've already laid down those patterns in your brain of how to do it. Your body knows how to do it. You know how to do it. You can do it without thinking in your sleep. You know how to putt. But if you start unpacking it and start thinking, right, I'm going to like move my shoulder over there a little bit, drop that one,
Yeah.
get my head a little bit like that, pull my neck back. And then you do it, you think, fuck it, it's not working. Why isn't it working? This should be working because this is the pucker knowledge I've got now from this top trainer. And it's not happening. You have to take several steps back and go back to what you used to do. So you told me once that when you was a kid, you really, really enjoyed golf because it was good fun. It was great fun. But as you got older, it wasn't so much fun because it became, I suppose, a way to earn your living and to keep trying to improve so you could rise up through the ranks.
Yeah.
You lost that absolute mindful joy of playing where there was no ends at stake. There's no odds. There's no like a purse or whatever at the end or a trophy or whatever. So you could just play for playing's sake and really, really enjoy it. And the trick to get back to that is to literally, well, we're talking about left brain, right brain. You have to merge them. You can't get rid of right brain, left brain, right, because it's really important. We need the knowledge. We need what we've learned to date. That's our accumulated knowledge and wisdom. But we need the creativity and the playfulness of the right brain. So you don't want to get rid of this, but you do want more of that. So you have to find ways to bring the two together so the two are working in harmony. And this is where things like Qigong work, breath work, because it brings in both sides of the brain at once. So you get what's called a gestalt. So you've got a whole body mapping, whole body thinking. You begin to repattern. So in getting out of your left brain and giving more to your right. So bringing the two into balance. So you're still valuing all this left brain stuff, but you're starting to say, okay, now we need much more of this, much more of this. So activities, especially physical activities that cross the centre line of the body, could really help that. Whereas with golf, because you're sort of to your side, aren't you, and you're crossing over to one side all the time, it actually reinforces the left brain thing. So you have to find activities outside of golf that take you onto the other side of your body. This is where like cross training is really good, cross training, because you're using both sides, but you need your arms to cross over, you need your legs to cross over. So there's different exercises that you can do to help with that. The famous one, the figure of eight.
Yeah,
the famous figure of eight. Perfect.
I knew that they'd come in useful at some point, Gyp.
You've still got them.
Awesome.
Okay, so
this is actually a gift from Gyp a long time ago, actually.
Yeah. So there's use it like to bring the two halves of the brain together and to make that corpus callosum knit and work.
Yeah.
So both sides are sharing. It's like you're two people. You've got this sensible side that learns stuff, that writes things down, that makes shopping lists, or it has a to-do list at the gym. And then you've got the other side, which is like, fuck it, I'm going to make it up as I go along. I'm just going to free fall. I don't care. This is your risk taker, the part of you that's like your Peter Pan. We'll talk about Peter Pan. Yeah. That's your the daring fall. Not really a fall. It's just really daring. He's ready to step off the precipice and try something new. Whereas the left brain's cautious. It's like, oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that, because that could get you into trouble, or that could embarrass you. You could embarrass yourself. Don't do that. So this tries to rein you back. The right brain's going, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. And if you add imagination into the mix, you've got this daring, playful side, like the child in you. You've got the adult in you. If you add imagination into the mix, you can really bring the two together. And
definitely. And I think that with regards to putting yourself in that situation, which creates the feelings of feeling uncomfortable, is almost the only way that you can progress beyond it, by experiencing it to start with. And so many people just don't ever want to kind of step out of that comfort zone.
No, you're right. They don't want to, but risk taking is really important. It's kind of, you don't know the answer, you're going to have a go anyway. So you said to me yesterday about certain movements you've made in golf, where you said there's a really tricky shot where the ball is stuck behind a tree, up a bank, round a corner, over a river, and you've never been taught how to deal with that situation because it's completely new. So you have to give yourself over almost to Peter Pan, to your right brain, and get out your own way, and you do it. You manage to pull off some kind of miracle that you can't even unpack yourself afterwards. You think, I don't know how the hell I did that, don't even ask.
I think people looking in today who would think about that, there's some great examples out there. I don't know if you're on board with this, Marcus, because obviously we watch golf and we know golf. Because golf's not your background, Gyp. I know I've introduced you and you've worked with tour players before. The best shots that I can recall have always come from like the most imaginative. So there's that famous Tiger Woods chip. Is it the 16th at Augusta, Marcus? Is that the right hole? Or the one with Mickelson again at the Masters, where he's kind of like punched it through the pine needles in the trees and hit a wonder shot. I think it was his second shot to a par 5. So those are the ones that you almost like you go back to when you're thinking. I don't ever think about the ones from the middle of the fairway that is put to like 3 foot. It's like, okay, well done, that's good. But it's the other side of it that's like the most impressive. Like the Seve, these are the superstars. These are the ones who, come to fruition and at the forefront of our brains when we look back and we try and be creative. Who wants to be like a robot? No one. But yet we're all trying to train like a robot, which is
Nobody talks about Seve's birdie that he made it in the fairway, then it's in the green into 6 foot and all in the port. They talk about him, he's 8 foot away from a wall, he's got a little gap through the trees and he's got 125 yards and he's got to get up and down to win a tournament, and he does it, and he pulls it off, and he pulls off like what appears to be a superhuman feat, and it's a moment of brilliance. And that's what people are attracted to. Because he's capable of something that is perceived to be abnormal. It's superhuman, supernatural, I'd say. But it's not. We've all got that capability. It's whether we can access it. And obviously Seve, we all know about Seve's background. And whenever we talk about creativity in golf, it always at some point goes back to Seve. At some point, we always mention Seve. We met or Tiger Woods or somebody who shows super creativity, and like you were saying, a massive, right side dominance with the brain, who can just create what are perceived to be just amazing feats. And they are moments of brilliance, but everybody has that ability to be brilliant.
Yeah.
And most people are doing things that are actually disconnecting them and sending them in the opposite direction. They're polarizing themselves from it. So we're talking about creative players and mentioning Seve, and in the same breath I'm going to mention Alex. So it's kind of but when you first met, when you first met Alex, talk us through it. What did you talk us through? What you went through?
I met Alex. I knew that he was meeting me because he was told that I might be useful to him, that I might have some things for him that could be interesting, that might improve his golf or whatever. And after spending some time with Alex, I found that he was very, he was like an open book, basically. He was like a clean slate. He wasn't completely taken over by all the teachings that he'd had already. He was ready to be really creative. He's a creative person. He was taking the stuff I was showing him and running with it. So he was ready. He was kind of like in a ready state. So he was already in a good state to meet me, if you know what I mean. But I took a while to get to know him, realise what sort of kind of person he was and how receptive he is to new information. And also, he is incredibly receptive to off-the-wall information. So rather than put up the blinkers and say, oh, no, I don't want to talk about that, sounds a bit weird, he'd run with it. He'd let me explain and demonstrate, like show him different things that would improve his state, improve his golf. Even though I'm not a golfer, I know that coming from a martial arts background, I know that body skills map over, mental skills map over, psychology skills map over. So something that would help you be a better, enhanced martial artist is also generally something that can make you an enhanced golfer or an enhanced thinker or a more creative being. So when I was training in martial arts, I still do actually, but my initial training was very physical. So that's the Kung Fu. Kung Fu means hard work. Hard work, it means training in repetitions. You're doing the same thing over and over again, a bit boring. And and it also means a consistent practice. So that's exactly what the word kung fu means. It doesn't necessarily mean martial arts, but in this context it is. But when I was doing that, I found that it was almost like the other half is missing. Where's the rest of this? Because I knew that there was a metaphysical application with kung fu as well in qigong. So I spent a lot of my time studying that stuff, learning qigong, learning different breathing techniques and ways to alter my state. And then when I went into NLP, it was kind of a way that it pulled it all together, because to get to master practitioner, you have to do what they call it a modelling project, and you have to model excellence. So everybody chooses their person or thing that they want to model. So it might be like some people, one person modelled her aunt's ability to bake really good cakes, and you've got all this sort of mundane stuff going on. And I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to model? This is really boring. I thought, I want to model Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. So I started learning all this stuff about his 1-inch punch and like the dynamics of the body and how he did it. But part way through it, I thought, this has got nothing to do with his ability to do a 1-inch punch. It's about his mind state. So I started looking at that and found out that he practiced something called no-mindedness, which is a form of meditation, but it's also breathing, breath work. And it was that was the foundation, that was the core that made him so exceptionally fast, so brilliant, so clever. It was the no-mindedness, this sort of state-changing stuff that he could do instantaneously. And the clue in it, when I was studying it, was his training partner was Dan Inosanto. He was, he's an expert in like Kali and Eskrima and like stick fighting, knife fighting. And he still does seminars around the world. And he was like Bruce's right-hand man. He said to Dan one day, because Dan always said, how do you do it? What is it special? What have you got? Tell me what you do that's so special. Why can't we all do what you do? And he's going, I don't know, man. One day he came round to Dan's and said, I know what it is. And he said, what is it? He said, it's in the body. And he went, what do you mean it's in the body? And he went, it's in the body. And he wouldn't explain any further, but it turns out it was posture and breath, posture and breathing. And he tapped into something inside himself that allowed him to like spontaneous action, explosive power. So everything that he embodied is kind of where I've come from, studying all his works and stuff like that, but also adding my own and leaving out stuff that isn't relevant. But Alex liked all this stuff, really liked it. And I think a lot of young people, well, people from my era especially, and onwards, all know who Bruce Lee is, and they're all fascinated about how brilliant he was. How was he possibly that brilliant? And I suppose you can say the same for Sevi, the same for Tiger Woods. They've all got this special something, and it's definitely linked to whole brain activity, moments of massive imagination, creativity in the moment that allows sort of miracles to happen that us, like ordinary people, don't seem to have these moments. But these people do, and we know that if one human being can do it, then so can we all. We just need to find what that ingredient is. So the work that I've been doing with Alex and the work that I've tried to share with Alex over years, I have shared with Alex, is about that. It's about finding your magical ingredient. So studying these other people to find out what makes them tick, which is the NLP process, is like unpacking excellence. How is a person that's excellent at something? How are they excellent? So you find out what their subjective process is and you map it out so you can try it on for size. So it's literally that. It's finding out what makes you personally excellent. What do we need to pull out of you to find your excellence, your champion, the inner brilliance, your sparkling creativity. And it's looking at all these different weird and wonderful things that aren't, I suppose they're not so weird and wonderful, but they are to the general public. They would be like wacky, off the wall stuff. Finding all those little things, and then as I find them, I write them down, as I said to you, in like little sound bites, which when I've created the thing for Alex, I knew that I couldn't bombard him with tons of science and information. It has to be something that he can easily absorb, he can identify with, and he can immediately use. So the books have to be written in these just like short chunks. And the reason I do them in different colours is so that the eye can focus. The eye knows when it's...
Sorry, one sec, sorry.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's right. Hello, baby. It's like when your eye is looking at black and white on the page, it just carries on and carries on, even though you might have paragraphs and what have you. If I do it in chunks of colour, it attracts the right brain to take notice, because the right brain loves colour. It likes childlike things. It likes diagrams and things like that. So you know that the words are engaging the left brain, but the colours are also engaging the right brain. And it's much more easy to absorb when you're writing like this. It's easier for me to remember, but it's easier for the other person on the receiving end to actually take it in, because it's automatically getting the right brain involved. And normally when you're reading, it's generally a left brain process. It's words, so it's a process. Whereas you need this side to come in to grab your attention and say, yeah. That I've just read one sentence. It's really excited me. I want to do something with that sentence, rather than you read it, get to the end of it, you think, yeah, that was pretty good. That was all right. It's okay, but I don't really remember much about it. One or two things in it got to me. This way, every little chunk can be that aha moment, almost that eureka moment. Yeah, I can do that. That's brilliant. And I don't mean that I'm not blowing my own trumpet saying that what I've written is brilliant, because obviously I've borrowed from all different sources to arrive at this stuff, and then I put my slant on it.
Yeah. It's the way that you configure it, how you like you say, how you pull it all together, and then apply it to the individual in a way that makes sense to them.
Yes.
And it's applying that right information to the right person. And
Absolutely.
Alex, so what was your experience then? Because this must have been something that you'd not really seen before, or maybe tried before, or I can imagine it.
I think with all my my team of coaches, almost you could arguably call it a board of council. They all had or went through this similar process of spending the time and getting to know me as a person before they started almost like educating me to a certain extent, which is a really interesting thing, because I feel like that's lost in translation a little bit now with the modern way of teaching, not in golf, but in lots of different things. People going for a session and the coach having almost like this preconceived idea of what he's going to coach that person before he's even met them. And that's such dangerous territory to me. And I would be very uncomfortable paying for a session when the coach is not really, or the person is not showing an inquiring mind as to what I already know, what are my beliefs or my philosophies, or all those sorts of things that are required in order to try and grow would be. And I think that's the first thing that Gyp did, as you did, as Mark did, as Nick did, and Andrew. So that's the common denominator between the people who I work with. So that was good to see straight away. And also the stuff that we worked on was highly effective, in all honesty. Not just in golf, but in the way it shaped my thoughts and feelings off the course in everyday life. I think that I had anger issues, in all honesty, when I was frustration issues. Maybe anger's a bit strong. Frustration issues. Even my dad used to say to me when I was playing for Hull City and training with the under-15s at the England National Academy, I was my own worst enemy. And I even used to elaborate my frustration out loud, effing and blinding, even at a young age. And that's me not having the ability to probably control my nervous system. But what Gyp's done, and as all of you've done, you've given me this insight and tools in order for me to then go away and explore what works well and what doesn't work well. And this is probably like we got to this point now where we can start to elaborate on what that actually means through conversation. If we'd have done this 10 years ago, I'd have been very, very nervous about trying to discuss this and explain what we've actually done. But because I've always had a tendency to record things, whether it's been via a dictaphone or film things or write things down, print emails off, I've always had records of it so I can refer to it. I think that's also another good thing for people to do. in order to go back to it, because so often you do forget things straight away. And Marcus, I know that I'm terrible with you. I'm like, oh, can you just film this for 5 minutes and talk me through what we've done? But that is the way I learn, and it's the way that I've figured out that's the way I learn. So understanding myself, so self-knowledge, and Gyp's basically like enhanced my ability to self-reflect and grow at the same time. So that's what I would say in regards to your question.
Yeah. So my next question then would be, so what kind of practical stuff did you do, and what tools have you learned to help you perform, basically?
I think a lot of it comes down to, we've covered so much, haven't we, Gyp? Bloody hell, we couldn't really cover every single topic or get anywhere near that today.
And it's so individual specific. I mean, it's something that it's not a generic approach. I mean, we talked about this. It's an individualistic thing, like everything in life. We're our own universe, so we don't even want to try and mimic or replicate something else. But
I think rather than explain what we actually did to start with and the tools, I'll talk about the things that I think have been the most I don't know what the right word is, the most consistent areas that I've used. And one of them would be definitely understanding the different types of breathing and having that understanding what that breathing does on your physiology. So golfers listening into this might think, what the friggin' hell's he on about now? But this is really important for understanding that when your physiology changes, you do start to create an optimal state of being in order to then perform. So like I touched on earlier about picking a book up, sometimes you're more like into the book and other times you're not. And this is creating this optimization of being in order to then go and do whatever task it may be. And so the breathing side of it, and then understanding how the heart's relationship on your body affects this physiology. So understanding not what makes you get into the zone, but also understanding what puts you out of the zone as well is just as important. So what is that trigger of knowing when you feel like shit stood over a putt, what is happening internally? And I think this is probably a good time to read off something that Gyp sent me in an email in 2012. And maybe then Gyp can elaborate on this relative to what happens internally in order for then to create this almost like internal chaos. And the next thing you know, it almost disables you. You hit a shot and you think, I've absolutely had no control over that. I've no idea what happened. The next thing you know, you're trying to find your ball or picking out the hazard. So I'll just read this, and hopefully it resonates with the people listening. So your heart is the first to register a negative feeling, as it is constantly monitoring your external and internal environments for anything untoward. You receive some bad news or something doesn't go according to plan. Let's say, for example, you just hit a shocking shot. Your heart contracts the exact instant it feels your stress. It then releases its chemical messengers to the brain and the rest of your body, saying, this is not good. A volley of negative thoughts stream through your mind. Some of these are so fast that they are outside of your awareness. Your chest tightens, your pulse rate increases, your breathing rises and speeds up and becomes ragged and erratic. You may experience a clenching of the body and fists. So in other words, we tighten up, which we all can relate to. Your dominant brain becomes flooded with your blood and it can no longer make logical or rational decisions. Your non-dominant hemisphere panics and goes into overwhelm. Not good at all. So I don't know if you want to step into that, Gyp, and just almost like explain what that actually means.
Yeah, okay. Well, when I was talking about the heart being the first thing to register anything negative, your heart, also your pineal gland, that's be known as your third eye in the East. We have a pineal gland that sits in our head, right in the centre of the brain, and the heart. And we now know also the gut is constantly monitoring the environment. So internal and outside. So what's going on outside, if it stresses us, the heart contracts. if something inside happens, like we have a negative thought, like, oh God, I've got a meeting tomorrow, the heart contracts. It can be instantaneous like that. And as soon as that happens, when the heart starts sending out its like cortisol, all the neurotransmitters that go immediately to the brain and to the gut to tell your whole body that something shit is happening, something's not good. And if you miss those triggers, if you don't recognize that that's happened in the moment, you can then disappear down the slippery slope, and you can rest yourself out of it, but it's a lot more difficult than if you notice it in the moment. So if you notice that your state has changed somehow, like suddenly you've tensed up, you've lost your relaxation, your breathing has changed, it generally starts to be higher in your chest, which means that your chi has risen, where you don't want it to, you need it low down in the dantian. All these messages are going around the body, and if you want to make a precise movement like a putt, then it's not going to happen, because everything that would lend itself to that precision, like calm state of mind, soft, gentle breathing, beautiful, relaxed body, that's gone in one instant. So if you can learn those triggers, so if something triggered you and you learn, you know that a sudden tensing of your body or a negative thought happens, you know then that the heart's contracted and you've got these hormones going around.
For me, Gyp, that's what I call my traffic light warning system when I'm playing golf. So when I feel like my brain goes towards the outcome before I've even considered hitting the shot, that's when I know. So amateur golfers might feel like they've with 3 or 4 holes to go, they've got a good scorecard going. The brain then wanders to outcome, and then that moment of, oh shit, let's not cock up. So then that itself creates this feeling of stress in the body. And that has been such a powerful thing for me to recognise, because I used to have that a lot. And what I said earlier before, when I used to vocalise my frustration when I was playing football, that's the nervous system kind of like responding or reacting to something. Whereas now I actually have the insight to, hold on a minute, I'm going to be calm, collective, gain control of my thoughts to start with, then gain control of my emotion, gain control of my physiology, and then that builds me back up to an optimal state of like feeling, so I can go back into that kind of like relaxed demeanor. And it's understanding that is just as important as what it is to understand what it feels like when we're kind of in the zone or flow, or whatever you want to call it.
Totally. You need to know your bad self. You need to know your negative self. You need to know your triggers, and also what that feels like. So the interoception of that, which is when you receive some upsetting news, whether that's a thought in your own head or somebody tells you something, and you get that gut reaction, that heart reaction, you need to know what happens next. If you know that your physiology collapses, you can't hear what other people are saying to you anymore, or you've become blinkered, whatever, they're your triggers. These are the things that we need to recognise, that sets us down that slippery slope.
Yeah.
Like you said, you know what your triggers are now, so you can arrest that. You can arrest it and get your energy back to how it should be, which means like deliberately relaxing, deliberately bringing your body back up into a dynamic posture, deliberately lowering your breathing down into a lower area, but not deep breaths.
What would you say, Gyp, to somebody who's listening to this and then thinking, okay, right, so what I'm going to do is when I hit a bad shot, I'm just going to try and relax my body, but then it doesn't quite work, and then the shot that they have afterwards just as bad, and then they what they will then do is kind of dismiss it as a load of pseudoscience or a load of crap and think, oh well, didn't work, so I might as well just revert back to type. I think that this process is isn't it, ironically enough, it's instantaneous in order to change your physiology, but in order to learn it, you've got to like expand your awareness of what it is that you're doing and how you train. So the training aspect of it, and this is where it takes time in order to accumulate the knowledge, accumulate the experience, and then relate that to those moments when they appear.
Totally, it's not a quick fix. It's something that you have to kind of work through and learn yourself. And obviously, when you're not in a golfing situation, put the thing to practice. So when you're at home, in your home environment, or if you're out and about, that's the time to start putting these things into practice. So then you take it back to your golf. You take the information back. It takes a while to wire in a new habit. And basically this is what it is, isn't it? You're creating a new habit that's resourceful. So to step out of your unresourceful state and into a resourceful state, you have to know what your triggers are and how to get out of them. So like you said, when you're on the golf course, you can't think, right, straighten up, big breath, you can't do that. You have to have some very, very minimal things that you can do very quickly in that instance. You can't say take half an hour to calm down. You've got to do it straight away. So, and you're not going to learn it on the course. You've got to learn it off the course. So
yeah, it's a good point. It's just not. This is not about 18 holes. It's not in a time frame. It's about doing stuff off the course, and especially for elite golfers and professional golfers doing it for a living. It's about trying to then have that filter into the sort of like the physiology as a golfer naturally, not forced. And there's a big difference.
Yeah,
and I think
it's a way of being, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a way of being, and developing that heightened sense of self-awareness whereby you can self-regulate.
Absolutely. Self-awareness is knowing what's going on in your body and recognize it, not becoming not zoning out from yourself. So not to be self-conscious, but basically very aware of what's happening with you and what your triggers are and how you react.
At the end of the day, the body is the equipment we're swinging the golf club with. That is the tool. That's just another tool like the golf club.
Yes,
and it's an ever-changing state.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like you've got to zone in order to zone out. What paradox that is. And also that's probably where the saying comes, is heart's not in it anymore, because then people look at body language and then they've gone, and it's it all connects. These dots connect eventually. The more you look into it, the more you start connecting the dots, because everything's connected. I mean, that's it. We're going off on a tangent there. Well, I am anyway, into the quantum field, but we're definitely not going to go down that route. But it's so fascinating how all this does have an impact on golf and sport and life.
Yeah,
golf's just the medium, isn't it? I mean, it's just the vehicle we're talking about today. But to apply all this, but it transfers through to every part of your life. It's just part of living. And I think that just going back to performance, because I think this conversation could go in any direction. And I love that. That's what and I'm hoping we're going to have a lot more, because I think there's so much to share, to engage people in another way of approaching it, something they may not have thought about before, but really is very important for finding their true self, if you like, so that they're actually performing, or allowing them to themselves to perform in a way that is authentic. And
100%.
And so therefore they are engaged with their environment. They're actually playing with freedom, like you alluded to earlier, playing a shot without even realizing how you've played it. I mean, that's the ultimate. And there's times when we know we're going to do something and we do it. We don't even have to think about how we're doing it. There's an intention there. Intention is a huge thing.
Totally.
Because that's what everything is born from in movement. I mean, there's an intention, particularly in golf. So there's an intention, and then there's an autonomous kind of reaction or response, or something that we're engaged with our environment, and we're just moving as part of that environment, and with an intention. It's got to be meaningful. I think the meaning is important. A lot of people lack the self-awareness because they've maybe not thought about it before in this way. Therefore, they lack the ability to self-regulate, so that it's changing dramatically. It's so turbulent. The system is so noisy, but they're not aware of that, and they're expecting to play consistent. I mean, the buzzword in golf all the time is I want to be consistent. Yet everything else is so chaotic. And being able to accept that chaos and embrace it, and channel their energy and focus in a way that is meaningful and purposeful.
Yeah.
But then, therefore, they also lack the ability to self-regulate then, so that when adversity hits and strikes, they're unaware of what is happening, and this results in a behaviour change. And for me, the golf swing is just behaviour. So they're talking about swing mechanics and technique, and this is that. Oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. But that resultant behaviour is just something that is a response to something that's happened, and they're unaware of that process that's taken place that's produced that movement.
Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
what you've talked about is so important in not just performance, because I see performance as just play. We're always at play. We're always performing. So when we're practicing, that's something that's key for me, Alex. Is we touched on this the other day with Lee Sharp, and I think, how do you recognise that when you're playing or practicing? I mean, I think I don't really differentiate between the two. I think we're always at play. We're just in a different environment with a different, maybe a different intention, but we're always at play. So how do you recognise and when that's happening, if you're on the driving range, say, and how do you kind of utilise these tools and Gyp as well? So when he's hitting golf balls, Gyp, and he's not in tournament play, and he's wanting to experience this state where he's performing, for the want of a better word, naturally, without having too much inhibition, and he feels he's really developing his skill and he's honing his skill. Yeah. What kind of tools can you use on a driving range, say, or on a practice ground to help you then develop this confidence on the golf course to be able to feel comfortable? Really, because I think you've got to allow yourself to be comfortable. It's like a lot of people, before they get to the golf course, are in a state of anxiety, and there's no way that they're allowing themselves to actually perform.
No, I think that's key. The anxiety thing before they even begin is teach them tools to step out of the anxiety very quickly, which is quite a few things that I work with. And again, it's sort of Qigong techniques and something that's called applied kinesiology. I don't know if you've heard of that. Yeah, applied kinesiology is pretty good. And again, that's about crossing over the body. You can quickly change your state by using very, very quick, short tools and get yourself in an optimal state. But then breathing is the best one ever. Breathing, literally, if you're anxious, for every state of mind, there's a breathing pattern. So if I'm nervous, my breathing is going to be high. Short. If I'm panicking, it's going to be up here. So it might be not as dramatic as that, but it's definitely up in my chest. To be relaxed and calm, I need to be breathing into my lower rib cage. And there's a kind of a fallacy that goes around, it's still bandied about now, that when people are anxious, to take deep breaths. But that just makes it worse, because then you're overloading an already anxious system by doing deep breaths. The idea is to sink the breath. You sink the breath and you breathe from low down. Very, very slowly, as slow as you can, you slow the breathing down and you take very small breaths, and that calms the whole system very, very quickly. And when you do that kind of breathing, you automatically go into a very small alpha state. So the breathing triggers the brainwaves. So you start to go into an alpha brainwave state, which is a state of relaxation. You can't be in alpha and be triggered. You can't be in an alpha brainwave state and be anxious. It doesn't work. The two states cannot occupy the same space. So when you take your breathing down, small breaths, low breath, lowering the body, everything then starts to calm down and relax. Your vision goes peripheral or panoramic, and your whole system starts to slow down and just get back into its optimal state, into homeostasis. So every time you get knocked off kilter, our job then is to know how to bring it back into kilter, back into balance. All day long we've been knocked off balance. All day long little things will happen that'll piss you off. You might spill your coffee, or you might drop your pen, or somebody rings you and you're in the middle of writing something really important down and you've lost, you can't remember it. Just little things keep knocking us off kilter. So if you can apply this stuff to those little things, when the big things happen, you know what to do. it's almost like you're teaching your body a skill, your body, brain, mind, a skill, a new skill, and that is how to get back to balance, how to get back to harmony, how to get back to equilibrium, so that you can optimize your behaviors. So whatever you're doing is always from your best self, not from a destabilized self. It's always from the best that I can be right now. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah, so you're using your breathing.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's habit forming.
Yes, it's about making habits. Yeah.
It's habit forming, so that just becomes just a natural response when you're on a golf course. You just don't even, so I think this is why that typical model of you learn a skill and then you're going to try and apply it on the course, and you're going to use coping strategies and things like this to try and, you're almost preempting something's going to happen, something's going to go wrong, instead of, and then you apply this kind of process. You're already creating a state of anxiety before you even play, because look, we're going to face adversity on a golf course, whether we like it or not, and we've got to. It's like walking down the road and and tripping, and it's kind of, you just accept it and you move on, and you kind of just, you don't. It's not. Exactly. You were intending to walk and something happened. You might trip and whatever, but you don't hold that memory, you don't hold that state. You just naturally adapt and continue, and you get on with your wherever you're going. So something, and on a golf course, not everything's going to go your way, and I think that's where the kind of people, the expectation as well, I think is important. I think expectation. I think this is something I noticed with Alex when I first met him, was the level of expectation, which is naturally, obviously high, and quite rightly so. But then that comes with a lot of baggage too, and I think a lot of people, the average golfer who comes along has an expectancy, and when they don't reach that expectancy, that's when shit starts to happen, really, and it downward spirals. And I think having that, having that self-awareness enables you to, like you said, is self-regulate, enables you to reach that homeostatic state where you can now continue. You've tripped, but now you're carrying on walking, and you're carrying on with your daily life.
Absolutely.
I think, Alex, talking, what I'd like you to discuss is a particular experience, Alex, where you've actually used this. Can you, anything that kind of sticks out in your mind, an actual event?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's always been different ways to perform, and I think that maybe someone listening to this might think that we're almost like describing that there's no real structure to what we're doing just by breathing and being aware of our physiology or state at that moment in time. I think that it's good to touch on the fact that it isn't always as easy as that, and there's different ways to build yourself up in order to perform, not just one way. And I've had different experiences of winning at different levels and performing at different levels, whether it's a win or not, because ultimately you're only ever, I'm probably like my biggest or my worst enemy, but yeah, it's possibly like my biggest hindrance and my biggest asset at the same time. The ability to understand that you can still win feeling shit, and it doesn't have to be A-star golf in order to win. Me and Nesty, we've had discussions on this lots over the years about this preconception of having to feel like you have to feel brilliant in order to then perform. That's almost, ironically enough, going against the grain a little bit of what this whole discussion's been. But I'm sure you'll both agree that this is real. This is the reality of it. But if you've got tools in order to recognise that and still be able to perform feeling crap, then that is such a confidence booster. And there's been stories told like that, loads and loads and loads, and it's about a perception as well. Let's say, for example, Harrington, I don't know what the stat is, but I'm sure he finished second, an absolute
load of times before he eventually won. And people who with a certain perception of that might think, oh God, he must be getting beat up because he's not winning. Well, his actual perception of that is, well, God, I'm performing that well constantly. It's only a matter of time. So the way that he spins that in his own brain actually then catapulted him into becoming a notorious tour winner and a 3-time major. But my initial goals, as it were, would be to optimize my my thoughts and feelings, so physiology. So like what Gyp's just said, and you've said, Marcus, about the way that you breathe and understanding how that and what that does to your physiology beforehand is really important. But that's definitely probably for a different talk on how to do that. And we've got devices. Me and you, Marcus, we went down to London many years ago, and we saw the guy who kind of invented this invented this system of being able to measure what it is when you feel coherent and incoherent. Because there's a key point here which needs to be touched on, is that sometimes even if we feel like we're relaxed, that doesn't necessarily mean to say that you're in this optimal state, does it, Marcus? It's you were there with me, and I always remember this with the when I've done this with other people on what's called the HeartMath device, their state of being suggests that they're in an absolute state of flux, but their actual demeanour is that they're very, very relaxed. So what's going on internally doesn't necessarily mean to say it's going on externally. And I've always been hyper aware of like the difference between the two because I'm quite sensitive to it. So that's always my first thing that I would go to when I'm going to tournaments to get myself in that situation. And then it would be a case of like, how do I then filter that into my body? So when I go onto the driving range, am I in a state of wanting to be creative? Am I kind of like loose and free? Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. And I think that's just basic physiology. Sometimes you wake up, you might have slept funny the night before, so therefore a side of your body feels a little bit different, and your brain becomes aware of that. And next thing you know, you're not allowing yourself to move freely because your brain's going on the area that doesn't feel comfortable. So then like having that as a system to be able to like let go and move freely is a real fine art, but it's very, very doable because you just go back to certain examples like that's when you can get technically minded and it can infiltrate your system and kill you. I know that when you were working at the Open, Marcus, that time, you talked about Dustin Johnson and his explanation of how does he hit a fade, well, or a high fade. His answer was, well, I just point the direction of the club in the sky and I just hit up on it, which is so basic, but so profound at the same time. So it's very, very simplistic. So for me, I've gone through a highly complex process in order to come out the other end of it being simplified. And it's taken years and years and years. And it's still why I'm keeping going, because I do generally believe that all this will come to fruition at some point. And it's just my journey, and everyone's journey is completely different. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight. But definitely when you're on the range beforehand, be creative. Try and express yourself in a way that you want to do. And I think that by constantly refining your thoughts and feelings on paper as well, definitely helps it stick, if that's a better word to use.
Yeah, I think certainly. I think the ability to be non-judgmental and to drop the expectancy as well, because the thing is that when we start to judge things, and for example, if we're starting to practice and we're thinking about, again, practicing a lot, I'm going to practice this over and over and over again, there's an expectancy that you're going to get better. And if it doesn't, I mean, you're judging your outcome, and that response to that outcome is a huge, very important feedback loop to how it's. And what it can also do is, we've talked about this before, Alex, is it can induce a sense of entitlement as well.
Yeah.
If I practice this much, it's almost like giving a kid a biscuit for behaving well. It's like I expect a reward. If I behave well, if I do my exercises, do my drills, there's a sense of self-entitlement there that I am. This is my reward.
Mm-hmm.
And I expect this to happen now.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't on the golf course, because of the way you're judging it, the outcome. I'm not happy with that. Suddenly now you're throwing yourself into chaos, and it's almost like a petulant child and so this mentality obviously elicits a really bad physiological response, and obviously the mind-body connection, everything's affecting everything. So suddenly you start, it can exhibit itself in your movement. You start getting erroneous movements in your golf swing, and you're thinking, God, what's this movement? I don't recognise this. Suddenly, this blueprint that I'm used to, this identity that I've got, it's shattered.
Yeah.
It's because it's so fragile. It's like it's been built on like a house of cards. It's something that looks nice. It might look pretty. You might feel resilient, but then actually, when things start to go a little bit, when you a little bit awry, you're not prepared.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't know how to respond. You don't know, because the lack of awareness is there. You don't know how to elicit that transformation back into that homeostatic state.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about, but this for me is something that should be practiced 24/7, not just on the golf. We're not talking about something that is just for a golf course, or this is something that is a way of being. It's just, and then no matter what happens when you're on the golf course, you are equipped.
Yeah, it sounds like to me. Sorry, I was going to say what it sounds like to me. I said about, like, obviously my background's martial arts, but what I found was there was a missing piece, and I had to learn the metaphysics of like the qigong and all that stuff. Then I felt like I was a whole martial artist because I had the other side. And I think this is the same thing we're talking about. You can have any golfer needs the other side. They need all that stuff that supports their golf. So it's not golf by doing breathing exercises or qigong or whatever it is that takes you there. But it's so imperative that you've got that to support your golf. That's your foundation. So then your golf will be better. Without it, you're just a technician. With it, you're a golfer. You're a proper golfer, and you can go places. I think it's almost like you've lost half the art if you haven't got it. And a little example of this, when I was first studying all this stuff, in the hall where I used to train, there was an Aikido group. And Aikido means way of the spirit, ki being the spirit, or chi or breath. So the guy was a fourth dan at the time, and I thought, I'm going to get him to one side and get him to give me like a masterclass in chi or ki, what it means to him, the spiritual side of Aikido or the metaphysical side of Aikido. And we arranged a meeting. And when I spoke to him, he said to me, what exactly was it you wanted to know? And I said, I want to know about the ki, like the chi in Aikido, because ki is just a Japanese word for chi, and chi just means breath. So he said, okay. So I said, well, what can you tell me about it? Because I'm building a study around this stuff. And he said, well, it's kind of a golden fluid. I went, okay. I'm puzzled, right? Okay. And I said, and what else can you tell me about? He went, well, that's it really. It's just like a kind of a golden fluid. That's all I can tell you. And I thought, my God, this man has reached fourth dan. He's teaching all these people Aikido, ki being right in the middle of that thing, like the way of the spirit. He's got no clue what half his art is, which is the breath work that's involved. And I was gobsmacked. And I thought, wow, I don't practice Aikido, but I already know much more than you about Aikido. And this is this thing. There's lots and lots of, so say golfers out there that missing that bit. If they could have that bit, like Alex has been learning for years, to get that bit as well in place, you've got a solid foundation of looking after your state so you can be the best golfer possible. You're not just learning on, you're not just going by what the strict lessons are saying that puts you in your groove that everyone else is learning, churning you all out and playing the same technique. This is giving you tools to make you adaptive and responsive and responsible and accountable for your own state, so that you can then be the best possible person. Before you're a golfer, you're a person. So you need to make the best possible person you can be and take that into your golf. So you've always got some resources, like a toolkit of magic things you can draw on in any situation. Whether it's like the crowd are putting you off because they're too close, they're shouting out and heckling or taking photographs and you're trying to concentrate. You've got a tool to deal with all that. You've got a tool to deal with if you're worrying about something at home. So you've got somebody ill at home and it's clouding your mind and whatever. You've got a tool to deal with too much expectation or end gaining. And they're all very similar tools. They all come back down to like physiology, like mind, physiology, breath. Very simple tools that you put into place to make you the best possible person, then the best possible golfer that carries you through that.
Yeah, I think Gyp, that in particular is a fascinating subject, and by partly you giving me a lot of these tools in order to understand what they are and then use them and then translate that into experiences and then reflect on those experiences for future reference is being what I said earlier about winning in different ways, because some people might think, well, what does that even mean? So what you've just touched on then, you might have somebody at home who's not very well, and it kind of puts things in perspective that golf is actually just golf and we're just trying to get the ball in the hole in as little shots as possible. It's very sort of like, it's very dynamic. It's a dynamical task, and it's also like there's loads of different dynamics to it, and each different area aspect-wise of the game, like whether it's psychology or whether it's technique, whether it's course planning. So your ability to react to all these situations basically makes you resilient, and that resilience, I think, creates a player and an identity. And that's when somebody knows who that person is. So understanding self is something I think that is massively overlooked. Most people don't even know who they are, really.
Yeah, true.
And then understanding their own kind of like tendencies, and then with that, then being able to work on those tendencies and see an improvement that way does take time. And I think that people don't particularly want to put the time and effort into it when it boils down to it. And that's just, I think it's just the way that we live and the world that we're in at the moment. But through conversations like this, I think it may explain why it's important to take the time and put the effort in order to not just help you be a better golfer, but help you like be a better person all around and perform in every aspect of your life, which is ultimately the beauty of sport, to be honest. And that's it really, from my point of view.
I think I think what you've talked about here kind of wraps it up beautifully. I mean, if we're talking about, if we go back to like the Seve, it's everything you can't see, not what you can see.
Yeah.
Most people will look at a golf swing and maybe even try and learn a golf swing by the aesthetics, by what they can see, by the physical elements. But actually, it's everything what you can't see that's making that movement.
100%.
And what we're doing here is we're talking about going down right into the epicenter, the origin of where these movements start to originate from. How do these movements configure? What things allow this to happen? What this organic process, which is this organisation in the moment, this self-organisation of movement in response to an intention. This is a very pure act, and we don't want to contaminate it and inhibit it. We want to do things and train ourselves to enable this to just happen instantaneously, at will, in response to that intention, and it produces a brilliant outcome. And that's what we saw when we look at Seve produce these brilliant shots. We saw him just react it's just
spontaneous.
The spontaneity, and that's what everybody starts to associate with Seve and the great players of our time and past generations. The spontaneity, they don't talk about they do talk about the technique to some degree, but actually what brought them to prominence was the brilliance, their ability to perform, and from that was born the golf swing. That was born out of that. So I think, guys, we could go on all day, and I'd love to. I wish I could. And I'm going to have a lot more conversations.
Absolutely.
But for today, I really appreciate your time, Alex, and Gyp, your time. It's been awesome to meet you. And
thank you for inviting me. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
It's been amazing. And just for you and Alex talking about your time together, me as a bystander, really, just watching really, and listening, more importantly, to your journey together. And you can see the chemistry, you feel the chemistry, and I think that's really important. I think, but just an insight into your workings together and how it, and continue to. I mean, it's a journey, isn't it? It's not, and there is no destination.
No, it's definitely an organic thing. It's constantly growing. Yeah.
So, Alex, anything you want to add?
No, I think that one thing I was thinking is that sometimes when we have these conversations, I can start to become a little bit self-conscious of the fact that I'm not top 50 or top 100 in the world in order to validate this conversation. But what I would say to that is, because I know that often people on YouTube clips might say, well, where is he in the world and all this sort of shit. Right? They're the sort of people that we don't attract anyway, so it's actually, it doesn't mean anything. But I think that because this last couple of hours that we've been talking is about developing like yourself, and developing like your enjoyment and longevity in the act of creating stuff. And it is taking us back to, you know, the playground at school when we lost ourselves and we're enjoyable. And if we can try and do that as adults, I think then you will live a lot more prosperous life than the ones writing shitty comments underneath and stuff after that. So it's not about, you know, me as, you know, a top 100 player in the world, because I'm not a top 100 player in the world, but I'm damn more insightful than the majority. So I think that's an important aspect to add, and hopefully I'll be world number one soon anyway. So fuck them.
Well, I think when you get people who are judgmental like that, they're stuck in their own paradox, unfortunately.
Yeah,
don't worry.
And like you said, I mean, that's really got no bearing on things, because ultimately you're on your own journey, and hopefully what we're doing is providing people some substance really to help them on their journey, and to learn from. We're all learning every day.
Absolutely.
And in order for us to grow, we need to learn, and I think acceptance is a big part of that. So whatever guy says what, or it's being resilient, and I think that's something where we could maybe touch on next time and delve more into that. I think
that's a really good point, actually. More of that next time, about where you feel that you made who am I to better say this stuff to you guys? I'm not a golfer, I've played golf, but I've done other things that might be useful to you, so I'm sharing them. You're sharing your experience with me, and that's the bottom line. And we're sharing stuff that might be useful to other people. If they want it, they can take it. If they don't want it, then that's fine too.
Perfect.
Yeah, a sense of perspective, and I think exploration is something we could talk about next time. Exploring our limits and beyond our limits.
Absolutely.
And what are limits?
Yeah.
And moving into that realm really. So we can. Today we're dipping people's toes into the water. I think, like I was mentioning to Alex earlier, we're not jumping straight into the deep end and trying to dive and get the brick out. We're just dipping the toes in, little gentle immersion into the shallow end, and then we gradually go into the depths, and then we're going to go. We're going to go somewhere dark and deep and and enlightening. I would say it's the enlightenment. I'm certainly feeling it. So
definitely.
Look,
perfect. It's a finish. Perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the viewers are going to get so much from this. So brilliant. Thanks ever so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
See ya.
See you later. Bye.